Hi, my name is Lou Salseda. I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I'm a black belt in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. I received my black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from Jean-Jacques Machado in 2001. I'm a black belt in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu under Ken Penlin, and I received that black belt in 1993. Several things are important to me. One of them is your teachers and your lineage with those teachers and the respect that you have for them for what they have given you in the skills and the arts. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. At about the age of 14, I decided I wanted to become a police officer. So, not knowing much really other than what I've seen on TV, I decided that one of the things a police officer needed to do was to have hands-on skills, some sort of fighting skills. So I kind of went on a quest throughout the different neighborhoods around my residence at that time, and I found a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu dojo run by a fellow by the name of Norm Leff. He was the sensei there, and he was both skilled in Judo and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. So from the age of 14 to 21, I studied under Norm Leff, studying in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And a couple other things that happened along that way. Because I was on this path to become a law enforcement officer, at about 16 years of age, I joined the local Police Explorer program. And then when I got into junior college and graduated from high school, I began working as a police student worker for the Los Angeles Police Department. And as soon as I turned 21, I entered the LAPD Academy. Great experience for me, but now I had kind of reached my dream and it was fulfilling my goals. Within a short period of time after graduating from the LAPD Academy, I knew it was essential that I had good martial arts skills for a successful career, but I also found that it was very important to have skill with a firearm. Very early on I discovered it's very, very important. So one of the other things I did in those first early years is to try to improve my marksmanship. My research told me that in Japan there was a martial art called Hojitsu, which was the way of the firearm, and I kind of used my prior training in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu to look at firearms training as a martial art and train as a martial art. So for about 10 years I really intensified my efforts in that area, and I sought out anyone in the United States that I thought was, in essence, a master sensei of firearms. And then I spent a good 10 years traveling throughout the United States, training with these different individuals that I identified and absorbing their knowledge, spending weeks with them at a time. I also began at about the same time, which helped me perfect my skills, began pistol competition. There was a law enforcement pistol competition. There were a number of matches throughout the United States. Typically there was a championship match once a year somewhere in the United States. And in Canada as well, there were championship matches up there. So actually for the past 35 years now, I've had a very successful career in that area as well. At the same time, from the late or early 1990s, I really began to intensify my martial arts training again. I not only practiced Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, but now started to get into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I found very, very intriguing. Although a lot of those techniques are really, their foundation is in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, there was a different way of getting to them, and there was a different ability to control your opponent and control the outcome, which is extremely useful for law enforcement as well as the civilian community because of litigation and liability. Well, I told you in the past I initially got involved in martial arts because I thought I had a calling and a career. I really found a home in martial arts. I enjoyed many of my experiences with a number of trainers, and I found the martial arts community to be very giving, very dedicated, And I also found that I really believe that they did an excellent job of building our youth up, teaching them many values that maybe they would get exposed to and maybe they wouldn't, but they were usually instilled those values, good values, at each of the respective dojos, and respect and so on. So I really think that the friendship that I've had with a number of martial artists, whether it's Richard Norton, Farbor Zazat, Jean-Jacques Machado, any of his brothers, has really been good in bringing about a positive environment for training, a positive environment for kids, and a positive environment for the community overall. If you're involved in martial arts, there's a couple things that I think you need to know. If you're primarily involved in the stand-up martial arts, you need to add some groundwork in. Many years ago we did some research in law enforcement, and we looked at thousands of street altercations with law enforcement officers, and we found that in about 65% of those altercations they ended up on the ground. Ideally, you want to stand on your feet, you want to resolve the problem on your feet, but our statistics showed that 65% of the time we ended up on the ground, so we need to know or need to spend some time down there and understand what's occurring down there. It's a different world, and again, having come from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu art that primarily was stand-up, a lot of weapons, but the only time you went to the ground was to finish a submission, or at the end of a throw, your opponent would be on the ground. You really need to spend some time, if you're a stand-up martial artist, on the ground. You don't need to get to black belt level, but generally if you can get to about what would be considered blue belt level, would be sufficient for you to be skilled enough to be able to handle yourself on the ground, as well as utilize your other skills as a stand-up martial artist. So there needs to be a balance there. If you're somebody who owns a dojo, you really need to have in your curriculum some ground fighting, some ground skills. It could just be basic. Part of that is just understanding how to get from a bad position to a better position. If you look at a number of street fights, and there's many different venues that you can look at street fights and what occur from, and they're all on the internet. But if you look at street fights, whether they're female versus female, male versus male, or combining the two, generally they end up on the ground, and someone ends up in a very good position, usually sitting on the other person or half sitting on the other person, and the other person cannot get out, and then they rain down the blows. You need to know or have some idea of how to get out of that position. It's good as a martial artist. It's good for anyone in today's society to figure out a way out of that position. So my advice, if you're a martial artist, be a complete martial artist. Study all the arts. If you're a stand-up martial artist, infuse a little bit of ground fighting into your program. If you're running a dojo, it's good business for you to infuse some ground fighting. If you're a stand-up dojo, it's good. It's good to do. It's good for your students. It's also good for business. Recently, I retired from law enforcement. After 34 years, it was a great career. I had some great jobs. I spent a great deal of time in firearms training and used a lot of the skills that I developed in my first 15 years in law enforcement. But now I've moved on, and some of the expertise that I've gained both in law enforcement and in the martial arts world, I'm now making it available. I'm now offering services in a variety of different ways to help other martial artists, to help other law enforcement agencies. And let me tell you about a couple of things that I'm doing. One, for anybody that runs a dojo, any martial artist that owns a business that involves training students, if it's a stand-up art, I can come in, help you develop a curriculum, help you train your students, help train you to train your students, and get you going on a successful road to ensuring that your students have some ground fighting skills while you ensure that they have their stand-up skills and they're skilled martial artists in whatever art form that you're teaching. The second thing I can help you with is if you just want private lessons. I can do that for you. I can put together a curriculum. I can show you what it takes to get to the different belt levels. And if you want that just for your personal gain or to pass on to your students, you can do that. Just before retiring, about a year before retiring, one of the individuals that I worked with for a number of years was Big John McCarthy. We worked a tactics unit together. And I encouraged Big John to share some of his knowledge and his experience in training and to open up a training academy. And in September of 2006, John did just that. He opened up a training academy in the Valencia area, and as part of that we gathered some martial artists that were in the local area and brought together a really good staff of instructors to provide martial arts training in a whole variety of martial arts, from stand-up to ground fighting. We even put together an MMA mixed martial arts program for people that might be interested in that sort of competition. But I do still work there 4 days. I teach actually four classes a week, and usually Monday and Wednesday. You're welcome to come out there, see what's going on, not only in the ground fighting world, but in the stand-up world. It's a phenomenal place. If you just look at Big John McCarthy or look him up online, you'll pick up his website. It's in the Valencia area of California. One of the other things that I do besides do some consulting and teaching in the martial arts area, specifically the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu or arrest and control type of techniques, I am also involved in working for Department of Homeland Security as a contractor. I do some instruction for them in a variety of first responder related topics. In case there's a weapon of mass destruction, in case there's a natural disaster, I do a lot of training for law enforcement and fire in that area. In addition to that, I am also a police litigation expert, which means essentially that I do litigation that involves a civil suit or a criminal suit against a law enforcement officer, and they need some expertise in police training, standards, tactics, and that sort of thing. I make myself available for that, and I've been doing that since prior to leaving LAPD. I was doing that for some time for the Los Angeles Police Department, and I've just continued that in a kind of a private practice way. Let me speak a little bit to role models. I think kids need role models, adults need role models, everybody needs role models. Growing up, my role models were my parents. Not everybody's that fortunate. So if you're involved in martial arts and you're training kids, think of yourself as a role model. So be very attentive to everything you do, your behavior, your attitudes. If they don't have a role model, you will be the role model, and they will be very reflective of everything they see you do. Just like kids at home are reflective of their parents. They usually have the same values, the same ideas, the same ambitions. So, you know, where I told you my parents were my role models, if you're involved in martial arts, consider yourself a role model if you're an instructor. In closing, well, a couple thoughts I'd like to leave you with. If you're training, never stop. Now I know training, many times you'll get injured. Many times it's just a luxury that sometimes you can afford, sometimes you can't. Sometimes the training location isn't always the most easy to get to, isn't the most economical to travel to, that sort of thing. But if you're involved in training, never stop. And even if you can't physically train, there are plenty of martial arts books, philosophies, how to to keep absorbing that knowledge, bringing it into your head, trying to emulate what you see in the books mentally sometimes is a good way to go. However, as you travel along, there's a lot of peaks and valleys in training. Don't give up. Keep at it. Whatever you set your goals at initially, I am sure you can achieve it. Whether you write it down and post it, where you're going to see it every day, or you just physically carry something with you that tells you your goals. If you really think about your goals, whether it's martial arts or anything else, and you concentrate and think about them every day, subconsciously, you're going to start working towards those goals and you will achieve them. So don't give up. Never stop training. And when you train hard and be intense and be respectful of those around you. Have a good day.